There is a specific texture to silence when it occurs in sacred places. Not the hollow quiet of a tomb, nor the suspended breath of a courtroom just before someone lies beautifully under oath. No, this silence was warm, toasted, buttered. It clung to the air like steam off a freshly seared waffle and tasted faintly of camphor, plum blossom, and bureaucratic avoidance. I was in a shrine that served waffles. Let me repeat that for those in the back row of reality. I was in a functioning Shinto shrine, converted through a combination of spiritual tax loopholes, fox magic, and late capitalist desperation into a Waffle House. And it was perfect. The Torii gate arched over the entrance like a smug eyebrow. The stone lanterns glowed with filtered divinity. The air hummed with ancient prayers and cinnamon glaze. I was seated at a lacquered cedar table, staring into the tectonic beauty of a Mount Fuji-shaped waffle so precise it could have been cast in bronze and placed on an altar to shame all lesser breakfasts. My tea steamed quietly beside me, respectful of the moment. And most importantly, no one was speaking. No requests, no complaints, no malformed prophecies written in marmalade, just the gentle, sacred calm of a being on break. Then she arrived. Her name was Fumiko. 9 tails, every one of them weaponized fluff. She moved like a calligraphy brush dancing on rice paper, elegant, practiced, and impossible to ignore. Her kimono whispered with every step. Her eyes sparkled with that unnerving combination of reverence and panic found only in those who run both a shrine and a breakfast menu.
Excuse me, Lord Cthulhu,
she said, bowing low and presenting me with a tray of apology tea, so artfully arranged it nearly made me forgive her in advance. I did not look up. I pierced the Fuji waffle with a single claw, severing it like a tectonic plate undergoing divine judgment. Syrup oozed from the summit like molten shame. I took a bite. She waited. I took a slower, more deliberate bite. She waited harder. Finally, I exhaled. I am not currently accepting quests, complaints, existential crises, or freelance hauntings. If your shrine is bleeding or your cook is possessed, kindly write it on a prayer slip and staple it to a tree like everyone else. Fumiko stepped closer. One tail brushed the side of my chair. Another coiled around my teacup and refilled it with practiced grace. The 9th tail, always the 9th, arched like a punctuation mark above her head, trembling with pleading emphasis.
it's my yokai staff. They're all gone.
She whispered.
I am operating this place by myself.
I did not respond. Responding is a gateway drug to involvement,
My previous yokai staff ate the customers.
she added. I chewed. That sounds like a staffing issue.
They were freelance, but I can't afford to hire anyone.
Several of my eyes twitched. No,
Please?
no,
Please?
no,
Please?
she whined, just barely. I froze. That was not a normal please. That was a strategically sugared vowel. Then, dear blind pantheon, she mewed, a tiny high-pitched,
Yeah?
like a cursed anime sidekick begging for side quests and forgiveness in equal measure. When I didn't respond even to that, Fumiko lowered her gaze, tails drooping slightly, ears flattening like failed croissants. She looked. There is no other word for it. She looked laminated in regret. A heartbreak folded across 3 dimensions. And that was unfair. Because croissants, as anyone cursed with a heart will admit, are my only weakness. I glanced down at the waffle, then back at her. She was biting her lip now, her paws, no hands, but fox-shaped in intent, clutched the tray with the tremor of someone too proud to beg but not above service industry guilt. I have done nothing to deserve this, I rumbled. She tilted her head, ears perking up.
You're thinking about helping.
She said softly. I'm thinking about how violently I regret empathizing with pastries.
You're such a good ancient horror.
Don't patronize me.
But you are, like deep down.
I am 10-dimensional wrath given form. Fumiko nodded solemnly, as if I had just announced a dietary restriction instead of an ancient divine truth.
I understand.
She said, bowing again.
But even 10-dimensional wrath requires breakfast service continuity.
Her logic was obscene. It bypassed theology and lodged itself somewhere between guilt and obligation, where all terrible decisions take root. I took another bite of the waffle. It was exceptional. Delicately crisp, structurally sound, emotionally redemptive. The kind of waffle that could win wars. The kind of waffle that could convince an ancient horror to assist with the morning shift. I sighed. Very well, I said, the words burning on the way out like bureaucratic acid reflux. I will assist, temporarily, on one condition. Fumiko perked up, nine tails twitching with barely concealed triumph. No mislabeling me as head chef, guest deity, or customer-facing mascot. I will work in shadows. I will haunt the margins. I will oversee from a position of condescending ambiguity. She bowed so deeply it became a kind of metaphysical agreement.
Of course. Thank you. Truly.
I have not agreed to be thanked,
Understood.
she said briskly, already turning toward the sanctum/kitchen, her sleeves trailing like ceremonial banners dipped in panic.
It's just... We've got a lunch rush in 23 minutes, and the syrup kami declared sentience during morning prep.
I stared at her as if she'd grown a third eye and offered it to me on a skewer. The tea judged me. The syrup what, Fumiko? A tremor echoed through the tatami, low, sticky, reverent, like someone humming Gregorian chants into a vat of treacle. Somewhere in the back a spout gurgled ominously. The air thickened, cinnamon, uprising, regret. Fumiko, I said slowly and with the restrained fury of a patient forced to read ancient tax law. Did you anger the syrup kami? She turned, too quickly, too innocently. The move of someone who knew exactly how guilty she was and was hoping to outrun causality.
I may have implied he was a condiment.
Implied.
In passing, during inventory.
A pause.
It was a stressful morning.
Another pause.
I only said it once, and very softly, to myself, while inventorying sugar.
I closed my eyes, counted backwards from 17 to suppress a multiversal herniation. Fumiko, I said, tone flattening into cosmic deadpan. You run a shrine. You pray to a rice cooker. You bow to spatulas. Why would you even suggest that the syrup kami is a condiment? She flushed.
I didn't mean to. It just... He was next to the ketchup, on the shelf, and I was trying to standardize the labels.
A spout hissed. Somewhere an egg cracked itself in warning. Let me get this straight, I said, dragging one claw down my face. Is it syrup that is a kami, or a kami that governs syrup? Or is the syrup itself a divine vessel of sticky omniscience? Because if I'm going to get spiritually immolated by flapjack fluid, I'd like to understand the taxonomical structure. Fumiko flinched.
All of the above.
Wonderful, I said. We're dealing with a Trinitarian breakfast sauce.
Isn't that what you do?
She shot back, waving wildly at my general existence.
You file gods all the time. You name them, index them, redact their tax records.
Yes, I growled, but I do not shelve them next to mustard.
I was stressed.
You committed theological slander via condiment categorization. She threw her hands in the air.
Oh, great squiddly wit of the eldritch beyond.
She intoned in mock reverence.
What do your people in Relaya even eat? Tell me, oh glorious archivist of horror, do ancient horrors not enjoy a well-organized breakfast station?
I did not dignify that with a response. Mostly because I was trying to remember if we'd ever settled the butter hierarchy in the 9th pantry of Nyarlathotep. We entered the kitchen. Not a kitchen. The kitchen. A sacred lacquered chamber of flame and ritual. Half Shinto sanctum, half industrial-grade diner. Cast-iron griddles hummed with ancestral memory. Incense sticks burned beside rice cookers. A wok perfectly seasoned and slightly haunted, floated gently above a simmering broth. Every utensil had a name. Every burner had a shrine. The spatulas were aligned in ceremonial order according to the phases of the moon. In the far corner, a waffle iron sat in a circle of salt. It hissed when I looked at it. Not aggressively, not even threateningly, just knowingly, as if it remembered something I did in a previous incarnation. Fumiko bowed low to the kitchen threshold, murmuring an apology to the tea spirit as she passed. One of them burbled from a cast-iron teapot with the audible tone of someone withholding forgiveness. The other spirits remained silent, but the air grew warmer. The spiritual equivalent of steeping a grudge. You realize, I said, ducking beneath a row of ceremonial ladles carved like ancestral guilt. This isn't food service. This is breakfast necromancy performed with haunted cookware. Fumiko straightened, snapping her apron tight across her waist like it was armor, passed down through emotional inheritance.
It's hospitality,
She said.
with consequences, and excellent plating.
I opened the rice warmer. It exhaled. Not steam, remorse. Sticky, fragrant, and generational. I closed it slowly as one seals a cursed love letter or a family recipe annotated in blood. She handed me a spatula, reverently, as one might pass a relic or a resignation.
You'll be on eggs.
She said. I stared. I do not scramble. I do not flip. I do not poach.
You do now.
I am a cosmic entity.
And I'm a shrine priestess with 20 minutes until the lunch rush, and a sentient bata spirit sulking in the freezer.
She dipped into another bow, this time to the griddle. Why, I asked, narrowing my gaze, do you keep bowing to appliances?
Because everything has a kami.
She said, voice sharp and breathless as she swept toward the sauce station.
And I need all of them on my side if I'm going to survive this lunch rush.
I turned to the waffle iron. It hissed again, lower this time, threatening. With a sigh, I extended one tentacle and bowed. The hiss softened.
Great.
She called, flipping a frying pan like it was a ritual fan.
Now do the rice cooker. He holds grudges.
I looked down at the spatula in my hand. This is absurd.
No, sleeping in an underwater city is absurd.
She snapped.
Now be a good squiddly wit and oil the pan with intention, or it'll curse your side of eggs.
I growled, but she was already moving, checking the batter shrine. whispering into the soy sauce, tracing sigils around the deep fryer. She offered a silent prayer to the oil spirits before igniting the tempura flame. It flickered with a holy blue shimmer. Then from the back pantry, it came. A slow, syrupy knock. Fumiko froze. Her tails flared like antennae.
He's waking up.
Who is he? She looked down.
The original syrup gummy, bound in a ceremonial bottle after the Great Pancake Incident of 1923.
I turned, slowly. You're telling me there's a primordial syrup god in a bottle in your pantry? She nodded affirmatively.
He speaks in sweetness and vengeance, mostly vengeance.
Another drip echoed, this time with the unmistakable cadence of looming theological litigation. I rubbed my face. Why does everything in your kitchen have a backstory?
It's a Waffle House on top of a shrine,
She said.
I think it's a franchise.
The knocks came again, louder, stickier. The pantry door bowed outward, as if reality itself was being kneaded from the inside. A glyph began to bubble across the doorframe, slow, spiraling, and syrup thick. Molasses writhed into the shape of an ancient sigil, one I almost recognized. It looked like hunger, but with worse intentions. I stepped forward, spatula in hand. The air rippled. The eggs trembled. You cook, I said, each word lacquered in disbelief. Like it's a religion. Fumiko shrugged, watching the glyph write itself.
Some people dedicate their whole lives to cooking and food. I am one of them.
She said. Her breath passed, not silent but reverent, like the moment before a match is struck. Then, still facing the door, she added,
By the way, if the syrup gummy fully awakens before the rice finishes steaming, we won't make it. He'll want an offering, something sacred, and I won't be able to open my doors.
We had less than 10 minutes before the syrup kami broke free and judged us all by breakfast. Fumiko dusted the marble slab with flour, not out of flourish but necessity. Her motions clean, practiced, and exacting. She moved like someone who had done this 1,000 times, each time under pressure, and no longer needed to speak to know what came next. Her sleeves were tied back with a faded ribbon, one ear twitching in quiet calculation. She pressed the butter block into the center of the dough and folded it over, crisp corners, no air pockets. Her fingers smoothed the seam like a priest sealing a letter to a forgotten god.
Roll it out,
She said, handing me the pin.
Lengthwise, even pressure, don't bruise the butter.
I took the rolling pin. It was wooden, dense, and far heavier than it looked. I'm better with metaphysics, I pointed out defensively. She didn't answer. She was already cleaning the countertop with a cloth worn into softness. Everything she did seemed like a memory being replayed. So I started rolling. The dough gave slowly under my weight, stiff from the chill, but workable. It resisted in a way I respected, like bureaucracy, like time, like grief. You know, this reminds me of the first thing I ever tried to bake, I said, when I first adopted a third-dimensional avatar. Flesh, fingers, heat sensitivity. It wasn't conquest or calculation I attempted first. It was baking, croissants specifically. The entire concept was a novelty to me, that something so fragile could be sacred through repetition. She glanced up, not surprised, just curious. A flick of her ear told me to continue. I clarified further. Thousands of years ago, I failed, burnt them. Forgot the second turn, tried to cheat the proofing process with a spatial distortion field, and in the process, discovered something called fun and a concept called golden brown delicious.
I'm guessing that first time blew up the kitchen.
She said, folding a clean linen over the backup batch.
Expensive fireworks.
Yes, and I tried it out in the safest place that could withstand explosions. Olympus. They sued me for some reason, I said. Zeus sued the interdimensional library for food crimes against narrative integrity. The case was sealed under pastry law. Fumiko shook her head, ears flicking.
Why do you even care about things like that? Laws, filing systems, court records. You're a cosmic horror? Shouldn't you be out devouring moons or haunting thresholds or something?
I sighed. Everyone asks me that. Is it really shocking? Because being an ancient horror is boring. And if I don't file things, no one else will. And do you know what happens to an unfiled narrative breach? It breeds. It lays eggs. It escalates into musicals. Her ears scanned the room in confusion.
What's wrong with musicals?
There are whole pocket dimensions cursed to repeat unauthorized adaptations of Les Miserables. I will not allow that again. Fumiko blinked.
What is a miserable?
A tragedy, I said, in which mortals burst into song about injustice, then die slowly over the course of 3 hours. She tilted her head.
So, French?
Very. I rolled another length. The dough softened a little under pressure, opening up.
You never struck me as someone who cooks.
She said. I don't, I said. I correct the trajectory of collapsing systems. Sometimes that looks like categorizing ancient languages. Sometimes it looks like this. Pastry therapy. A pause. She folded the dough over again, smoothing the edge with 2 fingers. Her hands were steady, unhurried.
Well, since we're being sentimental, when I was young,
Fumiko said like she was a kid at her show and tell presentation.
my family told me foxes were meant to steal, trick, feed on emotion and souls, that it was tradition, that hunger was sacred.
I eyed the syrup kami timer. We had minutes to spare. Well, do you think we can be anything else than what we were intended? Not disguise itself as something else, not trick others, but actually change? She didn't answer right away. She folded, pressed, turned the dough. When she spoke, her voice was steady.
I think we can all change, but not easily and not alone. Change isn't trickery, it's repetition. You do something small again and again until it becomes true. That's why I cook. Every time I feed someone, instead of taking from them, it becomes a little true that I'm something else.
She looked away as she said it, brushing flour from her palms onto her apron, like she needed to hide the weight of those words somewhere else. I thought back to the times I didn't pants Zeus during his meetings, and nodded in agreement. The library was like that, I said. All that knowledge, infinite hunger for categorization, until I realized I was just rearranging oblivion. She looked at me, really looked, for the first time since we started folding. Her expression wasn't sympathetic, just clear, understood.
And I cook,
She said.
because it feeds people, and because it ends in fullness. It's maybe not eternal, but it's hot, delicate, and flawed. And then it's gone. And somehow, that's enough.
The timer on the wall ticked. The oven exhaled a low heat. Outside, The shrine creaked in the wind. I laid a claw on the dough, pressed gently. The resistance was still there, but less so. We didn't say anything for a moment. The air between us settled like sifted flour. Then she said,
Good job. We beat the syrup kami at his own game.
The aftermath somehow wasn't a disaster. The lunch rush passed like a controlled implosion disguised as a miracle. Plates left the kitchen steaming and returned empty. The syrup kami remained sealed in his bottle, though he did manage to fork the glass in the shape of a passive-aggressive haiku. The rice cooker accepted my eggs without comment, a level of praise I had learned to treasure. And the batter spirit, after one final attempt to alphabetize the sesame oil by emotional viscosity, settled into a hibernation sulk inside the walk-in freezer. Fumiko moved through it all with the elegance of exhaustion. Her kimono was dusted in flour, 2 tails were tied together by accident, and she no longer whispered to every ladle, but she moved like someone who had bled chaos into structure and survived. I, meanwhile, maintained a station that bordered on divine sarcasm. Eggs executed with such structural integrity they received a ceremonial nod from the griddle. As the last customer shuffled out, humming something dangerously close to a hymn, I finally began to relax, just in time for one of them to turn back around and approach the counter. They were young, too eager, clutching a notebook like it contained the secrets to spiritual enlightenment or optimal toast settings. Hi, they said, with the tremble of someone about to do something noble and deeply foolish. I was wondering if maybe you'd consider letting me help out here, just for the experience. Fumiko stared at them, as if they'd asked to intern in a volcano.
You want to work here?
I don't need to be paid, they added quickly. This place, I can't explain it. It's like a breakfast-themed pilgrimage. I just want to be part of it. Fumiko was completely speechless, then looked at me. I, in turn, raised a tentacle and made the universal gesture for not my circus, not my yokai. She hesitated, holding back what looked like tears. Then, slowly, her shoulders dropped.
All right.
She said, a little dazed.
You can prep the pickled daikon. Just remember to bow to, everything.
The mortal nodded enthusiastically and vanished towards the prep station, humming to the vinegar. Fumiko exhaled, brushing a streak of egg from her sleeve. Then, as if pulled by ritual rather than intent, she turned back toward me and bowed. Full shrine formality. Head dipped, arms precise, sincerity woven into every vertebrae. I narrowed my gaze, then bowed lower. She arched an eyebrow and swished her tail, dipping deeper in reverence. I extended an additional tentacle for emphasis and curled downward with insulting grace. She dropped further, forehead grazing tatami, ears flat, tails arranged like a shrine diagram drawn in frustration. I uncoiled 4 extra limbs and flattened myself until my dignity brushed the foundations of Kyoto. The kitchen grew silent. Even the tea spirits paused to watch. One burbled, judgmentally. Fumiko inhaled through her teeth and slithered lower, practically liquefying into reverence. With a sigh, I raised one metaphysical appendage and tapped it once against the ground, just loud enough to echo like a ceremonial gong struck in sarcastic victory. Flat against the floor, she muttered,
So, itai?
Not even close. I struggled to speak as my face and tentacles mashed against the wooden floor.
You bowed with gratuitous appendages.
You bowed with emotional malice. A pause. Then she laughed, honest and exhausted. The kind of laugh that lets flour settle and time catch its breath. The oven clicked gently. A spatula rang out like a tiny bell. The syrup bottle stayed still. We were somehow at peace. And I knew I would be back. Maybe not because I wanted to, but because there was something fragile, precise, and sacred here. Folded, pressed, served with reverence. The kind of myth that tastes best hot, flawed, and fleeting. The croissants rose, and so did we. Eventually.